In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, May 2nd, President Yoon Suk-yeol says the Seoul-Washington Nuclear Consultative Group seeks to ensure a solid security framework that ensures genuine peace based on power, not fake peace based on goodwill. And bilateral talks are underway to set up a summit between the leaders of South Korea and neighboring Japan here in capital Seoul as early as this coming weekend. Meanwhile, inflation here in Korea accelerates at a slower pace in April, hitting below the 4% mark on year for the first time in 14 months amid lower global oil prices. We begin today with remarks by President Yoon Suk-yeol regarding the Washington Declaration and its security objective. Do take a listen.
상대의 선의의 기대는 가짜 평화가 아닌 압도적인 힘에 의한 평화로 미래 세대들이 안심하고 꿈을 키워나갈 수 있는 튼튼한 안보를 구축할 것입니다. 앞으로 미 핵자산의 운용에 관한 정보 공유, 공동 계획, 공동 실행 과정에서 워싱턴 선언을 잘 구체화해 나가는 것이 그 내용을 잘 채워 나가는 것이 중요합니다.
Speaking at a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday, President Yoon added that the South Korea-U.S. Nuclear Consultative Group is more practical than NATO's nuclear planning group, as it involves two partners and promises more frequent interactions. He also said his recent state visit to the U.S. has paved the path for broader consultations between the two countries beyond their security interests to include the diverse sectors of technology to allow for a win-win strategy for both countries. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department has stressed that the Washington Declaration is a result of North Korea's reckless nuclear and missile activities as well as its hostile rhetoric. Remarks to this end were made during a press briefing on Monday in response to questions about the rampant criticism of the declaration from North Korea and China. The department added that both Seoul and Washington remain open to diplomacy and dialogue with Pyongyang over its possible nuclear disarmament. There was also a call on China to refrain from overreacting as U.S. officials had briefed their Chinese counterparts about the declaration in advance. President Yoon Suk-yeol's address to a joint session of the U.S. Congress last Thursday in Washington, D.C. received more than 24 standing ovations from across the aisle. Now, that being said, our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon caught up with Andy Kim, a U.S. congressman, for more on his thoughts regarding the Seoul-Washington alliance and the assignments ahead. To take a listen.
U.S. diplomat turned lawmaker Andy Kim says South Korea and the United States are in it together no matter what happens, as the two countries mark the 70th year of their bilateral alliance. Speaking to Arirang News following President Yoon Suk-yeol and Joe Biden's summit last week, Kim stressed that the summit proved Washington is committed to working with Seoul in various strategic areas.
Anything that happens, it happens together, that there's going to be that consultation, and we can absolutely have assurances that we will never leave the South Korea exposed or vulnerable. That's part of what this was all about. We have a strategic interest in South Korea as a whole, and that's something that we're going to protect.
Kim also said the two leaders showing a, quote, embedded relationship, and that level of engagement will help the two get through global conflicts that the two countries may face in the future. He also added the alliance goes beyond just the two presidents and that there is a bipartisan support at U.S. Congress, which plays a key role in the alliance as well. In fact, at the U.S. Senate, while President Yoon was in Washington, a resolution was unanimously passed which welcomed the state visit by President Yoon and highlighted the importance of the ROK-U.S. alliance.
I also recognize that you got to have the resources and that deeper commitment, and that's what comes with the United States Congress. That's why it's so important that we had that joint session, an opportunity for all of us in Congress to come together and recognize and support this strategic alliance.
In light of the U.S. observance of AAPI month in May, Kim also shed light on his role as a Korean American and also an Asian American in the legislative branch. There are currently 4 members of the House with Korean ancestry, evenly split between the Democrats and Republicans.
When we see right now rising discrimination and violence against the Asian American community, you can't guarantee that the government's going to focus on that. It helps to have people that understand the experiences and the challenges of certain communities and background.
Kim further highlighted the role of Asian Americans as a bridge in the global community in times of high geopolitical tensions.
When we're focused on these issues right now about foreign policy, about having increased action towards the Indo-Pacific, and we have tensions and challenges between the United States and China, it's good to have Asian Americans be able to be people that not only understand the nuances here in America, but could also potentially be a bridge in helping us engage with the rest of the world too.
Calling South Korea a, quote, top-tier world power, Kim also expressed hope that South Korea will continue to step up not only as a regional leader, but a global pivotal state. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Washington, D.C.
Also on the diplomatic front, President Yoon Suk-yeol is poised to play host to his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida as early as this weekend. Our Han Sung-woo reports.
Seoul and Tokyo are in the final stages of negotiating a summit between South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida in Seoul this Sunday, May 7th. That's according to a senior official from South Korea's top office, who said that Tokyo had wanted Prime Minister Kishida to make a trip to Seoul since quite a while ago. Contrary to some observations that his visit would take place around the summer, it's been said that South Korea and Japan had already started negotiations for an earlier summit even before President Yoon's state visit to the United States late last month. The two countries are reportedly discussing terms to simultaneously announce the upcoming summit on Tuesday. And if it happens, it would mark the first time a Japanese prime minister visits South Korea in 5 years. Considering it would be held just over 50 days after their summit in Tokyo, South Korea is viewing it as the complete resumption of regular reciprocal trips, or what the two nations' leaders called shuttle diplomacy. Kishida's upcoming visit will come before South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. likely join forces for a trilateral summit in a few weeks on the sidelines of the 49th G7 summit in Hiroshima, to which Yoon was invited by Kishida back in March. It's still being arranged, but the three nations are expected to discuss security cooperation against North Korea's nuclear threats. Some diplomatic sources are even projecting a trilateral consultative body on extended deterrence to be newly launched, but according to a senior South Korean official, negotiations on that haven't begun yet. The latest developments come just days after Yoon and U.S. President Joe Biden signed the Washington Declaration to further strengthen the ironclad ROK-U.S. alliance, a move that has angered not just Pyongyang, but also Beijing and Moscow. China and Russia's foreign ministries have claimed the new accord destabilizes regional security and increases tensions. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
In related news, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's trip to South Korea will signal the normalization of top-level diplomatic visits between Seoul and Tokyo. Now, this is according to National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong, who added the summit will also provide the two leaders with a chance to address issues ahead of the G7 summit scheduled for later this month in Hiroshima. Speaking to YTN back on Monday, Cho said the date of the summit will be announced officially after relevant details have been hammered out. Meanwhile, in response to questions about a possible apology to Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor by the Japanese Prime Minister, Cho simply stressed the importance of balancing the past and present. He also dismissed reports about Tokyo's potential involvement in the Seoul-Washington Nuclear Consultative Group. Consumer prices here in Korea tangibly slowing down. For the first time in over a year, inflation accelerated below the 4% mark in April. Our Yoon has details.
South Korea's consumer price increases, a key gauge of inflation, have fallen below the 4% level for the first time in 14 months. The latest report from Statistics Korea show consumer prices in April rose 3.7% compared to a year earlier. That's down from a peak of 6.3% last July. This follows a drop in oil prices. Prices of petroleum products fell 16.4% on year in April, marking the sharpest decline since May 2020. South Korea's benchmark Dubai crude came to $83.44 per barrel on average in April, which is nearly a 20% drop on year. Prices that haven't dropped, though, include the prices of personal services, which grew faster at 6.1% on year in April, up from the 5.8% in the previous month. This increase comes from the higher costs for dining out, as well as insurance and housing management costs. Officials from Statistics Korea say that given the high base effect, prices are expected to stabilize further in the second half of this year. But uncertainties remain regarding global oil prices, potential hikes in gas and electricity rates, and the $1 exchange rate. 이은진, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., JPMorgan Chase is taking over the reins of ailing First Republic Bank, and pundits including U.S. President Joe Biden applauded the acquisition, adding it would ensure stability within the American banking system. Our Song Yoo-jin has more.
San Francisco-based First Republic Bank, which had been the 14th biggest commercial bank in the U.S. last year, has been sold to banking giant JPMorgan Chase after being taken over by financial regulators. On Monday local time, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation announced that it has seized First Republic and that JPMorgan Chase will be purchasing all of the troubled bank's deposits and assets. According to the FDIC, as of April 13th, First Republic had approximately $229.1 billion in total assets and $103.9 billion in total deposits. Following the announcement, U.S. President Joe Biden greatly welcomed the deal.
I'm pleased to say that the regulators have taken action to facilitate the sale of First Republic Bank and ensure that all depositors are protected and the taxpayers are not on the hook.
This comes a few days after First Republic reported losing about 40% of its deposits in the first quarter of this year. Depositors started losing confidence in the bank, pulling out their money after witnessing the failures of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in March. Despite a $30 billion rescue package from 11 banks in mid-March, the situation worsened, with the bank's stock falling more than 75% last week. After a rocky few months for the U.S. banking sector, JPMorgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon told analysts over the phone that though there are chances that another smaller bank may fail, Monday's takeover has pretty much ended the current banking crisis. With Monday's takeover, all 84 First Republic offices across 8 U.S. states are reopening as JPMorgan branches. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And in more sobering news, weather experts say we are looking ahead to unprecedented heat waves amid the return of El Niño next month as its cooler counterpart La Niño retreats. What's more, coupled with the current climate crisis, El Niño this time around is forecast to force temperatures worldwide, quote, off the chart. Our Lee Jae explains.
Roads flooded by record-breaking rainfall in Pakistan. Entire villages in Germany covered in driftwood and garbage after the country's biggest rainfall in 100 years. India seeing temperatures close to 50 degrees Celsius in the month of April. All of this as a result of an unusually long period of the La Niña, oceanic and atmospheric climate pattern that has lasted for 3 years. La Niña refers to the periodic cooling of ocean surface temperatures in the central and east-central equatorial Pacific that usually lasts for 9 to 12 months, but the recent cycle started in August 2020. And as such, the heat imbalance spreading from oceans into the atmosphere can cause global disasters. While weather experts have predicted a transition to the El Niño climate pattern in June, the phenomenon is set to begin a month earlier as the water temperature in the monitoring area rose sharply last month. And according to simulations, by September, water temperatures could rise by more than 1.5 degrees compared to a normal year, resulting in a stronger El Niño. Weather experts in South Korea are closely monitoring the effects of the new El Niño cycle. When El Niño develops during the summer season, the expansion of the high pressure that drives the heat in Korea is delayed. This means the rainy season and intense heat also start late, and southern regions could see frequent heavy rain. And now, what seemed to be an end of unusual weather patterns due to the prolonged La Niña could actually be the beginning of more unsettled weather ahead of the start of El Niño. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Preparations are underway here in Korea as thousands of teenagers from different corners of the globe are poised to fly into the country this summer to partake in celebrations for young scouts. Our Choi Soo-young was at the venue of the planned event.
The World Scout Jamboree, a camping event held by the World Scout Federation every 4 years, boasts over 100 years of history since the first London Jamboree in 1920. This year, from August 1st to 12th, Saemangeum will host the 25th World Scout Jamboree. Over 43,000 teenagers from 170 countries around the world will travel to South Korea's west coast for the event.
The upcoming gathering as a global-scale international youth event being held for the first time after COVID-19 will be a great opportunity to promote Korean culture, tradition, and advanced digital technology to the world through the successful hosting of this event.
Ahead of the event, Arirang News had the chance to take a sneak peek at the preparations for the festival. The committee is putting its best efforts to prepare for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for young people.
The 2023 World Scout Jamboree is taking place here in Saemangeum. This is the second time Korea has hosted the event following the 1991 Jamboree, which was held in Goseong, Gangwon-do Province.
The Saemangeum Jamboree camping ground will be a total of 8.84 square kilometers, 2.5 times the size of New York City's Central Park. Scouts will be able to experience K-culture within a Korean Cultural Experience Center to strengthen their friendships. About 140 programs are also scheduled to take place, including rope walking and aerobatics. One Girl Scout member says she wants to introduce Korean food to her overseas friends.
Korean ramen is delicious whatever its brand, and I'll introduce tteokbokki too because it's a famous food in Korea as well.
Officials are working hard to ensure the event goes smoothly. They have implemented measures for crowd control and to cope with infectious disease, heavy rain and heat waves. The director of World Scout Federation says he has great expectations for this jamboree.
So we have tens of thousands of scouts from around the world who are looking forward to coming to Korea and experiencing the magic of the World Scout Jamboree here in Saemangeum. And we thank the Korean hosts for their hospitality.
Choi Soo-young, Arirang News, Saemangeum.
On K-pop, BTS member Suga's first solo album DDay debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 chart. Suga's DDay is the highest charting album by a South Korean solo artist in US history and shares the glory with bandmate Jimin, whose solo album Face also debuted at number 2 earlier this year. Together with member RM, who peaked at number 3 with Indigo last year, Suga is now the third member of BTS to make the top 10 on the Billboard 200 as a solo artist. The Billboard 200 chart ranks the most popular albums of the week in the US. Suga's DDay claimed the 4th largest weekly sales of 2023 with 122,000 pure purchases. In sports news, Mallorca's South Korean midfielder Kang-in has been shortlisted for a place on the La Liga team of the season. He is one of 18 midfielders from the Spanish top flight in the running. Earlier on Monday, he scored Mallorca's only goal in its 1-1 draw against Athletic Bilbao. His 6th goal of the season also makes him the first South Korean player to secure double figures for combined goals and assists in a La Liga season. The La Liga team of the season will be whittled down to 15 players who have performed remarkably this season, as chosen by fans, players, and a panel of experts.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. We begin in France, where nearly 300 people have been arrested amid violent May Day protests opposing the French government's plan to increase the retirement age. At least 108 police officers have been injured, while the number of protesters injured is still unknown. The protests took place on International Workers' Day on Monday. France's Interior Ministry says almost 800,000 people took to the streets nationwide, but labor groups claim the number is 3 times higher. While most protests in the country were peaceful, some saw the use of petrol bombs and fireworks, with protesters setting vehicles alight and attacking businesses. The protests follow months of strikes against the retirement age increasing from 62 to 64. The French government says the measure is needed to address a pension funding deficit. Moving over to Sudan, the United Nations said on Monday that the conflict-ridden country could see over 800,000 people flee amid prolonged battles between warring military factions. The UN estimates that 580,000 of the refugees will be Sudanese citizens, with the rest made up of foreign refugees who had previously arrived in Sudan. It added they may flee into 7 neighboring countries. So far, at least 73,000 people have already fled, with 40,000 crossing into Egypt. Fighting between troops from the Sudanese military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces has continued for over 2 weeks, leaving hundreds dead and thousands more wounded. The conflict between the groups has continued despite a number of internationally brokered ceasefire agreements. Legendary rock band Aerosmith has announced its final tour. The 4-time Grammy Award-winning band said Monday it will perform at 40 locations in North America as part of its Peace Out tour. According to lead guitarist Joe Perry, it's time to say goodbye after 50 years of making music together. The tour will include the original lineup, with the exception of drummer Joey Kramer. Formed in 1970 in Boston, Aerosmith was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001. The band has sold over 150 million albums, conducted 10 world tours, and is known for hits such as I Don't Want to Miss a Thing and Dream On. The tour kicks off on September 2nd in Philadelphia, with the final concert on January 26th in Montreal, Canada. And finally, Barbie has released a new doll in its Inspiring Woman series to honor late Hollywood icon Anna May Wong. Toy company Mattel said on Monday that the doll is meant to increase representation in the toy aisle. Anna May Wong starred in hit Hollywood movies in the 1920s and 1930s and is seen as the first Chinese-American movie star. The doll's release coincides with Asian American Pacific Islander Month, which recognizes the contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander Americans to U.S. history. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. If you liked yesterday's weather, I'm sure you're enjoying today's as well. It's just the big temperature differences between morning and afternoon causing many people to come down with a cold. And again, gaps will be as wide as 15 degrees Celsius in many parts of the country. Now we are having top readings hovering around 25 degrees Celsius this afternoon under full sunshine nationwide with decent air quality. But don't forget your sunblock and sunglasses. UV rays remain high to very high across Korea during the day today. Meanwhile, a dry weather advisory is in place in the east of Gangwon-do and has been expanded to Daegu and some of Gyeongsang-Pukto province. And making matters worse, the regions under the dry advisory are windy as well. So please be careful with anything that could cause a fire. Now, another fine late spring day is in the forecast for tomorrow. Then the rain starts from Jeju tomorrow night before spreading nationwide by Thursday. And sadly, Children's Day on Friday looks to be a rainy one for most of us. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That ends our Tuesday afternoon newscast. We have our panel session coming up in a few minutes, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.